Hi guys, and welcome to Silver Face and Body Painting. This is Face Painting for Beginners Part 1, Round Brushes. Today I'm going to go over the basics. If you're new to face painting or have never picked up a brush before, this is the perfect place to start. I'm going to go over brushes, paints, how to hold a brush, loading brushes, thick to thin lines, swirls, dots and starbursts. The brushes I'm using today are a round number 2 and I believe there's a round number 4. If you have one lying around, use that. If you can only buy one at the moment, I would recommend a thicker brush than you think you need, and I'll show you why in just a second. You hold a brush the same way you hold a pencil. The handle should be resting between 2 fingers and your thumb. Your hand should be sitting roughly at the end of the handle, closest to the brush. The further away your hand is from the brush, the harder it is to control your movements. Don't be afraid to rest your hand against the surface you're painting on for support, as long as it's not on the paint. This will make your movements easier to control and the lines will be much crisper. The paint I'm using is FPA or Face Paint Australia White. This is a water-based or water-activated paint, so it's solid. If you're looking at starting face painting professionally, this is the kind of paint you want. I use mainly FPA and Tag, which I buy from Looney Bin Products in Melbourne, Australia, which is linked below. Other good quality brands are Paradise, Snatheroo, Superstar and Wolf. Loading brushes. When painters talk about loading brushes, they just mean putting paint on the brush. This may seem like a very simple concept, but loading brushes incorrectly can ruin the shape of your brush. To load a round brush, dip the brush in water and press the side of the brush into the paint. Roll the brush between your fingers and pull it back towards you to make sure every side of the brush is coated in paint. If there's too much water on the brush, the paint will run. If it's too dry, your lines will be patchy. Be extra careful with running or too wet paint near kids' eyes. You can test it on your hand first to make sure it's the right consistency. To paint thin lines, press the very tip of the brush onto the skin and pull the brush across the skin lightly in a straight line. To make your lines thicker, press your brush down harder onto the skin. This is why I would recommend a thicker brush. Once you master this technique, you can get pretty thin lines with thick brushes, but you struggle to get thick lines with thinner brushes. This is a base to pretty much all face painting designs, so it's important to practice this until you feel comfortable with your brush strokes. Practice thin to thick lines by starting out lightly and pressing the brush down harder as you go. Now reverse that by starting with a thick line and bringing your brush off to thin. To paint a scar, for example, paint a line that starts thin, thick in the middle and back to thin at the end. Practice painting these thin to thick strokes on angles and around corners as well. To paint tiger stripes, start with a thin line, press thick in the middle around a curve and wiggle your brush back and forth in the thick middle part to create a textured look. Make the other end thin again. To paint swirls, start with a thin line and press to thick as you curve inwards, lifting the brush off again to thin at the very end. I start mine on the outside, but some painters find it easier to start in the middle and work outwards. Try both and see what is more comfortable for you. To paint teardrops, start with a thin line and press your brush firmly down on its side to create a teardrop shape. To paint starbursts, start with a point on the skin, do a thick to thin flick upwards, come back to that point, do a thick to thin flick downwards, come back to that point, repeat it on the left and right. You will now have a 4-pointed star. Starbursts are great for adding a little something extra to designs or for covering up mistakes. If you'd like, you can add another 4 shorter lines in between those 4. You'll end up with an 8-pointed starburst. To paint dots, just hold your brush point over the skin and press down. The lighter you press, the smaller your dots will be, and the harder you press, the thicker your dots will be. Thanks for watching guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more videos.